everybody, and welcome back to Storytime with Stuffy.
Christmas edition.
So this is episode 4, and today we will be, as per usual, reading from the Jesus Storybook Bible, and we will also be picking and unwrapping a book. So today we are reading The Young Hero and the Horrible Giant, and it is found in 1 Samuel 17. God's people had some scary enemies, but the Philistines were the scariest of them all. And now the Philistines had come to fight them. The Philistines had a great weapon called Goliath. Goliath was a terrifying soldier, and worst of all, a giant. A giant so strong and so tall and so scary that no one had ever been able to fight him and live to tell the tale. So there they were, the Philistines standing on top of one hill, God's people standing on top of the other. And every day, Goliath came out and shouted, "Send your best soldier over to fight me. If he wins, we will be your slaves. But if I win, you will be our slaves." No one spoke. No one moved. "Chickens," Goliath bellowed. "Your God can't save you. I'll rip your heads off and have you on toast." His beady, greedy eyes glowered at them hungrily from under his horrible helmet, as if at any minute he really might gobble them all up. And he laughed his terrible laugh. Ha, ha, ha. It boomed, echoing horribly around and around in a dry valley. Well, Goliath might just as well have been a green, slimy monster with 3 heads, because God's people froze with fear. Their eyes glazed over and they turned deathly pale. They knew if someone didn't do something quick, if someone didn't save them, but God would do something. He would send someone to save them. Now you remember that David was the youngest son of Jesse? Well, his brothers were soldiers in the army. One day, when David brought his brothers their lunches, he saw Goliath, and he saw how scared everyone was. "Don't be afraid," David said. "I'll fight for you." "You're only a little shepherd boy," the king said, "and Goliath is a great soldier. How will you fight him?" "God will help me," David said. So the king gave David his royal armor to wear, but it was too heavy and too big, and David couldn't even walk. "I won't need this," David said. Instead, David picked out 5 smooth stones from the stream.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Took his slingshot and walked towards Goliath.
Step, step, step.
Goliath walked towards David.
Thud, thud, thud.
"You," Goliath peered down at the small boy. "I'm little," David shouted up to him, "but God is great." Goliath laughed an even terribler laugh than usual. It went. With just one swing of his giant sword, Goliath could finish off the boy, but David kept going. It isn't how strong you are or how many swords or spears that you have that will save you. It is God who saves you. This is God's battle, and God always wins his battles. David put a stone in his sling, swung it around, and let it go. The little stone flew, whizzed like a bullet, through the air and struck Goliath thud right between the eyes. Goliath stopped laughing. He stumbled and staggered and crashed, fell dead. When the Philistines saw that Goliath was dead, he ran away. And when God's people saw them running away, they cheered. God had saved his people. David was a hero. Many years later, God would send his people another young hero to fight for them and to save them. But this hero would fight the greatest battle the world had ever known. Okay, now there are some questions. Okay, so what's the book you picked out? Unwrap it in front of the camera.
The Little Match Girl. The Little Match Girl by Hans Christian Andersen.
It's Hans.
It was late on a bitterly cold New Year's Eve. The snow was falling. A poor little girl was wandering in the dark, cold streets. She was bareheaded and barefoot. She had, of course, had slippers on when she left home, but they were not much good, for they were so huge. They had last been worn by her mother, and they fell off the poor little girl's feet when she was running across the street to avoid two carriages that were rolling rapidly by. One of the shoes could not be found at all, and the other was picked up by a boy who ran off with it, saying that would do for a cradle when he had children of his own. So the poor little girl had to walk on with her little bare feet, which were red and blue with the cold. She carried a quantity of matches in her old apron and held a packet of them in her hand. Nobody had bought any from her during all the long day, and nobody had given her a copper. The poor little creature was hungry and perishing with cold, and she looked the picture of misery. The snowflakes formed her long yellow hair, which curled so prettily around her face, but she paid no attention to that. Lights were shining from every window, and there was a most delicious odor of roast goose in the streets, for it was New Year's Eve. She could not forget that. She found a corner where one house projected a little beyond the next one, and here she crouched, drawing up her feet under her, but she was colder than ever. She did not dare to go home, for she had not sold any matches and had not earned a single penny. Her father would beat her, and besides, it was almost as cold at home as it was here. They had only the roof over them, and the wind would whistle through it, although they stuffed up the biggest cracks with rags and straw. Her little hands were almost stiff with cold. Oh, one little match would do some good. If she only dared, she would pull one out from the packet and strike it on the wall to warm her fingers. She pulled out one. Whoosh! How it sputtered and blazed. It burned with a bright, clear flame, just like a little candle when she held her hand around it. Now the light seemed very strange to her. The little girl fancied that she was sitting in front of a big stove with polished brass feet under it. There was a splendid fire blazing in it, and warming her so beautifully. But what happened? Just as she was stretching out her feet to warm them, the flame went out, the stove vanished, and she was left sitting with the end of a burnt match in her hand. She struck a new one. It burned, it blazed up, and where the light fell upon the wall, it became transparent like gauze, and she could see right through it into the room. The table was spread with snowy cloth and pretty china. A roast goose stuffed with apples and prunes was steaming on it. And what was even better, the goose hopped from the dish with the carving knife sticking in its back and waddled across the floor. It came right up to the poor child, and then the match went out, and there was nothing to be seen but the thick black wall. She lit another match. This time she was sitting under a lovely Christmas tree. It was much bigger and more beautifully decorated than the one she had seen when she peeped through the glass doors at the rich merchant's house this very Christmas. Thousands of lighted candles gleamed under its branches, and many colored pictures such as she had seen in the shop windows looked down at her. The little girl stretched out both her hands towards them. Then the match went out. All the Christmas candles rose higher and higher till she saw that they were only the twinkling stars. One of them fell and made a bright streak across the sky. Someone is dying, thought the little girl, for her old grandmother, the only person who had ever been kind to her, used to say, "When a star falls, a soul is going up to God." Now she struck another match against the wall, and this time it was her grandmother who appeared in the circle of the flame. She saw her quite clearly and distinctly, looking so gentle and happy. "Grandmother," cried the little creature, "oh, do take me with you. I know you will vanish when the match goes out. You will vanish like the warm stove, the delicious goose, and a beautiful Christmas tree." She hastily struck a whole bunch of matches because she did so want to keep her grandmother with her. The light of the matches made it as bright as day. Grandmother had never before looked so big or so beautiful. She lifted the little girl up in her arms, and they soared in the halo of light and joy, far, far above the earth, where there was no more cold, no hunger, and no pain, for they were with God. In the cold morning light, the poor little girl sat there in the corner between the houses with rosy cheeks and a smile on her face. Dead. Frozen to death on the last night of the old year. New Year's Day broke on the little body, still sitting with the ends of the burned-out matches in her hand. She must have tried to warm herself, they said. Nobody knew what beautiful visions she had seen, nor in what halo she had entered with her grandmother upon the boards of the New Year.
Well, that was a sad book, but the illustrations are super pretty, and it was kind of had a happy ending because she ended up going to heaven, so she got to see her grandmother and she wasn't suffering anymore. All right, now we will go do the activity that was drawn. One.
I wish.
It says decorate gingerbread house.